Straight talk from Israel. You're listening to Israel News Talk Radio.
Welcome to Israel Unplugged. This is where you get the unadulterated facts of where we're holding in the redemptive process, focusing primarily on the ingathering of the exiles. I'm Josh Wander, speaking from Yerushalayim, Yer HaKodesh, and I'm here with my co-host, Rabbi Moshe Lichtman from Beit Shemesh.
Yes, hello, everybody. A little bit of a sad day today. As I'm sure you all know, it is Tzom Gedalya, which we'll talk about a little bit later. We're all fasting, so a little bit of a hard day, but we're still here, and we have a great show up for you.
Yes, we do, and we're looking forward to also having an incredible guest, which is an opportunity for everybody that's listening, especially from abroad. The guest is going to be Eli Bialik. We'll introduce him fully when he gets on. Eli Bialik, he is a senior advisor at Nefesh B Nefesh. So all of those people that are listening that had any Aliyah-related questions, practical questions about how one goes about Aliyah, about the Aliyah process, this is your opportunity to phone in. It is a live show, so you can call in from North America at 301-768-4841. Again, it's 301-768-4841. If you're here in Israel and you have Aliyah questions, you can call the Israel number, which is 02-650-0151, 02-650-0151. And we encourage you to call in and ask your questions for Eli or for us. We are free for that. Now, I also want to mention that we have two important sites that you want to look at. One is bringthemhome.org.il. You can also look it up at israeltorah.org. It's a site that has many Aliyah-related information that will be beneficial to you, as well as the site of Rabbi Lichtman, which is toratzion.com.
Toratzion.com.
Right. So you want to check that out also. That's where all the books that you want to be reading on the subject happen, and we're going to be right back with you. Thank you.
Always challenging the status quo. Hello, I'm Rod Bryant on Beyond the Matrix here at IsraelNewsTalkRadio.com. I want to encourage you to listen each week, every Wednesday at the same time, for an amazing show that will challenge you, inform you, and inspire. News, views, and wisdom for the nations here on IsraelNewsTalkRadio.com. Don't forget, Beyond the Matrix every week, Wednesday, here on IsraelNewsTalkRadio.com.
Welcome back to the Israel Unplugged show. As promised, we have a special guest today. His name is Eli Bialik, and he is the expert. He is the expert on Aliyah. He has assisted in over 6,000 Olim, making Aliyah through Nefesh B Nefesh during his 10 years at Nefesh B Nefesh. And Eli has served in a variety of capacities and is currently the Nefesh B Nefesh Municipal Liaison and Community Advisor. Eli volunteered in the Golani Brigade in 1988, participated in a humanitarian mission to the Jewish community in Syria in 1992, and made Aliyah to a kibbutz as a single. Eli is married to Mazi, a Sabra born to Moroccan Olim, and together they're raising their 5 children in Beit Shemesh. 30 years ago, making Aliyah alone, Eli is now surrounded by over 20 close family members in Israel, including a son currently serving in Golani, and his parents, whom he escorted on their Nefesh B Nefesh Aliyah flight. Welcome, Eli, to the show.
Thank you so much for having me.
Is that all up to date, what I just said about you?
That's up to date, but it's a good thing that you asked now because my son is going to be released from Golani in about another 3 weeks, Be'ezrat Hashem. He put his time in, and he's about to finish.
B'sha'a tova. So it's so wonderful to have you on the show again, and we really wanted to ask, because this is first of all, this is an opportunity for those that would like to call in. This is a live show, and you can call in from North America at 301-768-4841 with your questions. This is an opportunity to ask questions of someone that is high-ranking in the ranks. So, but we want to let me just go back. We just finished Rosh Hashanah. We're living. We've just passed an unprecedented year of. I don't have any other words to say, but craziness, and it seems to be continuing and maybe even worsening this year. There was a period of time where I think Aliyah was definitely going through the roof. The calls were coming through Nefesh B Nefesh like crazy. And again, you might correct me on this, but just my feeling has been that feeling has peaked, where everybody wanted to just escape the craziness in America, whether it be the financial instability, the riots, the anti-Semitism, the corona, and they wanted to come home. And then it started to go a little bit down. And I feel like we're on that downside where people are saying, you know what, it's not really that bad. You know, there's corona in Israel. They have terrorism there too. They have their own troubles. Maybe we should just stay put and see what happens with the American elections. What are your feelings?
Oh, no way, Josh. No way. I can tell you from somebody who's sitting on the front lines and is interacting with Olim, there is incredible amount of interest. I don't think that the interest has waned at all. I think that perhaps people are looking at Aliyah as far as a little bit more for longer-term planning than coming in 2-3 weeks because they want to get out. People are saying, you know what, we understand that this is a significant shift in what's happening in the world right now. Why stay where I am indefinitely? My kids aren't really doing great in school. Where the financial and other situations aren't as great as they have been in the past. Let's start thinking about a plan that we've always wanted to do, but now we'll have the opportunity to do it in a more organized fashion. When Corona started, so we had, within a couple of weeks, we had thousands and thousands of people contacting us. Now we still have a very, very strong, steady stream of people who are interested and are looking to plan not just to come for the immediate future, but also to come in a year or two.
So there's
let me just ask a question. Something you said that these are people who always had this plan on the back burner, and now it's become more of an actual desire. The question is, are there any people who were not thinking about it at all until this point and now are starting to think about it?
Okay, so let's say there are. I don't believe that there is a person who feels close to the Jewish roots and has never thought about Aliyah, okay? But there's a difference between somebody who contacts Nefesh B Nefesh and takes the next steps forward and submits an Aliyah application. We have people who have been coming to our events, to our mega events, to our fairs over the years, and we have a database of tens of thousands of people who have come to our events but not necessarily have taken the next step and actually submitted an application. We have many of those people today who are actually in the process of applying for Aliyah. In addition, there are people who haven't been in touch with us in the past. And what we're trying to do is we're trying to help facilitate their research. And I think it's important that people understand that we're not interested in promoting people to come on Aliyah if they're not ready to make Aliyah. We want them to have a solid plan. We want them to know more about specific communities. So we do have people who are new or coming into our pipeline, But we're also very careful to make sure that we are helping people learn more about what Aliyah is about, and not, nobody should chas v'chalila feel that they're being pushed in any direction.
Now, there are a lot of people out there that were somewhat turned off by the rumors, at least, of bureaucracy, whether they be true or not, to the extent that they are bureaucracy around Corona. That's we're a red country. We're not letting in tourists. There was a whole question around students. How do you think that has affected Aliyah? Are people being let's start a different way. The questions that you're getting now, are they different than they were a few months ago when Corona started?
The questions are a little bit different. We did get applications from a couple of people who were interested in coming to Israel. In other words, they were applying for Aliyah as opposed to getting a tourist visa to come in, okay? Because during a certain period of time, nobody really had any understanding what was going to be for the foreseeable future. And we've spoken to all of the people who have applied for Aliyah, and we explained to them, okay, that when you are applying for Aliyah, this is a process of acquiring citizenship, and it's nothing that you should be taking lightly. And therefore, it's not a quick fix to get into Israel. Making Aliyah is acquiring citizenship to live here in Israel. So there had been, a few people like that, and I think that we're really not seeing that as much now.
Well, I'm glad to hear that, because that is, we.
Shalom, everybody. Making a difference often takes just one moment and one person at a time. I am Eli Bialik, your show host on Israel News Talk Radios from Jerusalem with love. You'll be hearing people talking about politics, religion, social issues, and making a better tomorrow. Join me, Eli Bialik, for God and Country. From Jerusalem with love.
Wednesdays on Israel News Talk Radio.
Psalm 23, the Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. Did you know this psalm and many others were composed by a Jewish shepherd and musician who later became a king? Would you like to know some of the inner meanings of psalms to help you connect with God and strengthen your soul? An exciting and easy-to-read book is now available which will help you do just that. Software for the Soul, Psalms for Everyone, available on Kindle, Audible, and Amazon.com. Software for the Soul.
Modesty at the beach? It isn't just about body image. It's about feeling good. Modest swimsuits, so we don't get burned by the sun.
So we won't get ogled by strangers.
So we'll feel free to express ourselves without the need to expose ourselves.
Let Marcy Modest help you to cover up what you want, how you want.
Made in Israel.
Visit marcymodest.com. That's MARSEA modest.com.
And get a 10% discount on your first purchase.
Anyways, we apologize for the technical difficulties. I was just discussing a magazine article that upset me to no end. Probably last year, I think it was. It was sort of like a Jewish Dear Abby, and there was a mother that was complaining in this article that was writing that her daughter spent a year in seminary and now is brainwashed, has come back, and all she wants to do is make Aliyah, and she's not willing to even go out with any boys that aren't considering living in Eretz Israel. And what can I do for my poor daughter who's been brainwashed? And the responder responded and basically said something like, she'll get over it. This craziness, this mishugas that's in her, this juke, as we would say here in Israel, that's gotten into her head. She'll get over it, and eventually she'll come. Just give her time, and she'll get over this whole whole idea that she has to live in Israel. And it was just so sad to see it from that kind of perspective of seeing Eretz Israel as being something for outsiders and something that's meant to be, like I said, a gap year that you do as a stint, and then you go back to your regular life. I understand that Eli, our guest, is back on. Eli, you there? Okay, so we will continue.
I just wanted to say that, I don't blame anybody for their concern. 2,000 years of exile can get a person pretty much attached to where they are right now. And the decision to make Aliyah and to leave everybody and everything that they have known before, to come and to join the Jewish people here in Eretz Yisrael and be part of this beautiful Jewish society. It's not an easy decision, and I can understand parents. I can understand families, but on the other hand, every grown adult needs to make their own decisions.
Yes, Rev Schechter, Shlita always has these questions about whether a student should decide to stay in Eretz Yisrael, or he should listen to his parents who are against him staying in Eretz Yisrael. And he always used to say that he's part of the parents' union, so it's hard for him to answer that question. But in fact, it is a mitzvah, and as soon as you understand that it's a mitzvah, the halacha is clear that if your parents, even if your parents ask you to transgress a mitzvah, you don't have to listen to your parents. You have to be respectful, but you still have to do what is the right thing to do.
So Josh, let me tell you what I do when I was in that dilemma, and I asked my parents. My parents said to me, please come back to the U.S., finish up your college degree, and then make Aliyah, and you'll be able to provide for your family, and you'll be able to have a parnasah. And I said, you know what, Abba, Ima, you're absolutely right. I went back to the U.S., and I finished off my degree, and then I came to Israel, and then I brought my parents on Aliyah.
Right.
That is a beautiful story.
That is for sure.
I believe it's an anomaly, because as Rabbi Lichtman and I, who have been involved with gap year students for many, many years, knows that once a student goes back to go to college, the vast majority of them never return.
Correct. No doubt about it. But I would say that's not even part of the halacha question, because your parents are not telling you not to fulfill the mitzvah. They're telling you to fulfill the mitzvah correctly, which is, in order to make Aliyah, you have to have some source of income. If you don't, then you don't have a chiyuv to make Aliyah. You are not allowed to become a burden on the society here. So therefore, his parents, your parents, Eli, were telling you the correct information. If they would say never make Aliyah, that's when the halachic sources are pretty clear that you don't listen to your parents when they're telling you not to do a mitzvah.
So, Eli, before we got cut off, we were talking about government advocacy. It's one of the things that Nefesh B Nefesh does. And my question has to do with what has been done in the past several months since Corona, and what is continuing to happen on the political realm as far as government advocacy and making and streamlining the whole process for Olim.
Okay, so there are two things. There is the Aliyah process, and then there is Aliyah during Corona. Now, the Aliyah process, just about 3 months before Corona hit, it changed significantly in that the Misrad HaPnim, the Ministry of the Interior, had changed criteria for documentation and has made it I don't want to say it's their fault, but they had their reasons why they changed the documentation criteria. But it has become more of a challenge to get certain documents for Aliyah, and that has nothing to do with Corona. It just happened to be that it went into effect a couple of months before it started, specifically requiring that every single civil document have what's called an apostille attached to it, and that had not been the case in the past. So the apostille requirement has been making things a little bit more difficult, especially now where many offices, U.S. government offices, are working at a slower capacity because of COVID. The other thing is because of COVID itself and Aliyah, when a person makes Aliyah, they need to go into a mandatory 2-week self-quarantine. And that is challenging. Additionally, people who came on pilot trips traditionally, to check out different community options and perhaps to close on a home, to sign a rental agreement, can't come visit, in before they make Aliyah, but rather they're doing this remotely. And this is a challenge, but we're overcoming these challenges, and we have Olim coming every single day, and we're assisting the Olim understand the process, and we're helping them to the best of our ability.
What is the process with COVID? What happens when Olim come in? Are they provided a hotel? How do they quarantine if they have not yet purchased their own home?
Okay, so many of the Olim have friends or family who are in Israel and are able to help set them up in their own quarters for self-quarantine. And then there are others who do not, and they will work through a realtor, and they will be able to find a place, whether it's for a month or 2 months, and they'll be able to quarantine for the required 2-week period. Additionally, if somebody tells Nefesh B Nefesh that they are unable to make their own quarantine arrangements, so then the Israeli government handles that. Okay, the Israeli government will provide a quarantine set up for the required period of time. It's just that it may not be as comfortable as a situation as if somebody sets up their own quarantine, their own apartment on their own.
We have a caller coming in from Pittsburgh. His name is Yaakov, and he has a question for you, Eli.
Sure.
Yaakov, are you there? Yaakov from Pittsburgh? Okay.
He must have fallen from the line.
Still lost him. That's fine.
Okay.
Call back.
All right. He was about to be our first caller, but all right, someone else is going to have that distinction.
That's all right. So what you're saying basically is that one way or the other, if somebody really is committed to make Aliyah, then they will find the means to quarantine. The government, if necessary, will help them do so. Correct.
Yeah, the quarantine isn't what's going to make or break a person's Aliyah. I think though what is significant is for people to appreciate that the COVID situation in Israel, although it started off being one of the countries that had the lowest levels of COVID, right now we're in a slightly different situation, and right now we are in a seger, I don't even know, a closure for a period of 3 weeks.
Closure. Lockdown.
A lockdown, thank you. So that's also challenging for Olim, who came 2 weeks ago. They're just coming out of their self-quarantine, and then now they're in a lockdown for 3 weeks. But any Oleh who
he's breaking up a little bit.
No, it's fine. I hear him fine.
Yeah, so what I just wanted to say is that any Oleh who feels that they're having difficulties during this time, we are in contact with our Olim, and, we help them to the best of our abilities, and we are able to put them in contact with people locally on the ground in the different communities who are able to assist them, with their immediate needs.
Let's not forget the rabbi's statement that Eretz Yisrael nikneit b'yisurin, right? That Eretz Yisrael is acquired through suffering. So everybody has their suffering. The people nowadays are suffering through the COVID, and we all had our challenges.
Right, but I think that anybody who's making Aliyah today can acknowledge that Israel today is not Israel of 20 and 30 years ago. I mean,
we're going to have to continue. We have a break now. Can we continue after the break?
Okay.
You're listening to Israel News Talk Radio.
This is Shai Bentako, and each week I'll be webcasting to you from Judea, origin of the word Jew, a people besieged and beleaguered in every generation. Nazi Germany is but a memory, but in its place the world invented the phantom Palestinians as this generation's internationally authorized Jew killers. Tune in for a different slant on life in Israel, Phantom Nation, every Monday.
Hi, I'm Rabbi David Aaron. The soul basics are the most profound, the most essential, and yet often the most neglected in our education. Join me for Soul Talk on Israel's News Talk Radio and discover the secrets to love, spiritual growth, and personal power.
How did a nice Jewish girl from Delaware end up living in Israel? Shalom, I'm Natalie Sapinski. Join me on my show, Returning Home. Meet different people who have moved to Israel. Hear their personal stories, their highs, their lows, and everything in between. Each week, we talk to experts on immigration and the process of moving to Israel. Listen to Returning Home every Thursday, only on Israel News Talk Radio.
So welcome back to Israel Unplugged. We're talking here about Aliyah, of course, as we always do, but we usually talk about the philosophical aspects of Aliyah. Now we have a practical representative from Nefesh B Nefesh on the line, Eli Bialik, and we interrupted him, unfortunately, in the middle of something. So did you want to finish up what you were saying?
Well, I just wanted to say, we were talking about bureaucracy and the challenges of just the Aliyah process. I think it's always important for us to remember that Israel of today is not Israel of 20 and 30 years ago. I mean, it's such a different country. First of all, everywhere you go in Israel, it feels like it's a country on steroids. There's construction all over the place. You see Binyan Yerushalayim, not just in Yerushalayim, but you see the entire country from Kiryat Gat to Kiryat Motzkin, the tremendous development of the country, the infrastructure, the trains, the bridges. I mean, it's just unbelievable. So, yeah, Eretz Yisrael niknei b'yisurin, but I think that the yisurin that people have today when they make Aliyah are much smaller in magnitude than the difficulties that there were when people made Aliyah, many years ago.
No doubt about it. But I would say, though, that, it's always proportional to what there is outside the land. In other words, it used to be, much more difficult to live anywhere. And, so Israel was a little bit worse. But, now that, the world in general is more modern and more comfortable, so, Israel has to have a little bit of a disadvantage. And the reason is so that Jews will choose to live in Israel not because it's the best place in the world and the easiest place in the world to live, but because we understand that this is where God wants us to live. Do we have a caller?
I don't think so. Eli, tell our listeners that want to know more information about how one goes about Aliyah. Tell us about your site. Tell us about how they can contact you. What's the best way?
Sure. So Nefesh B Nefesh is the organization that is responsible for promoting Aliyah from the United States and Canada, and you can learn a wealth of information about Aliyah by going on to the Nefesh B Nefesh website, nbn.org.il. We have what's called an Aliyahpedia. It's an encyclopedia for making Aliyah with close to 1,000 pages of information, whether it's about employment, Aliyah process, shipping, benefits that are provided by the Israeli government, healthcare in Israel, etc., etc. It's all there. When a person is ready to apply for Aliyah, on the Nefesh B Nefesh website, there's an online application. It takes about half an hour to fill out, and it's a joint application with Nefesh B Nefesh and with the Jewish Agency. The relationship between Nefesh B Nefesh and the Jewish Agency is that we're here to promote and to facilitate Aliyah. The Jewish Agency's responsibility is in determining eligibility for making Aliyah under the Israeli law of return.
Wonderful. Thank you so much for being our guest, and we hope to have you on in the future. Thank you, Eli.
Thank you.
Have an easy fast. What's left of it?
Yeah. Yes.
And on that note.
Okay. Speaking of the fast, exactly. Tzom Gedalya, a little bit of the history. After the destruction of the first temple by the Babylonians, Nebuchadnezzar, so probably people don't know this, but all the Jews were not exiled from the land. Some were, but there was a significant community that still existed in the land. And there was still a ray of hope because there were Jews still living in Israel. There was that ray of hope that maybe, we'll get back. Maybe we'll be able to rebuild. And it won't be a complete, absolute exile and destruction. With the assassination of Gedalya ben Achikam that we commemorate today, that was, in the words of the Rambam, Maimonides says that Nichba, I don't remember the exact words, but Nichba Gachelet Yisrael, that last ember of hope was extinguished, and that was the complete dispersion of the Jews from Israel to the exile, and we mourn that. I mean, this is one of the fast days that is connected to the destruction of the temple. It's in the same category as the 17th of Tammuz, the 10th of Tevet, Tisha B'Av, the 9th of Av. It's all part of the destruction. It's a very, very sad day, and seemingly you would think, but I don't understand. The temple was destroyed way before this. This was a political assassination. Why should this be part of the destruction, part of the fast days for the destruction? It's because this was like the nail in the coffin. This is what really sealed the fate of the complete exile of the Jewish people from the land of Israel at the time of the first temple. And I think that this is a very important idea here, and that is that even though there was no temple, the temple was already destroyed, but there was still hope. There was still something good in the fact that there were Jews that were living in Israel. There was a community of Jews living in Israel. So much so that there had to be another fast day established when that level was also destroyed, when we were finally sent into exile. And this is an important point because a lot of people say, more, in the Haredi camp, they say there's nothing special about Israel today. There's no Beit HaMikdash. There's no temple. We don't have the Messiah. We don't have a religious Jewish government. We don't conduct ourselves according to the laws of the Torah. And therefore, what's so special about it? Nothing special. So what? There are Jews living in Israel. Nothing special. We're still in the depths of exile. They say that. They say that there's no difference between 500 years ago and today. Doesn't matter that there's almost half the Jewish people living in Israel. And that is a cardinal error that they are making, because this is what we talk about all the time. You know, your introduction every week to our show is where we are in the redemptive process, and we are very far into the redemptive process. And I want to prove it to you from a Gemara in Chagiga 5b. So the Gemara says that it quotes a verse from Yirmiyahu, which says the word, some form of the word tears or crying 3 times in the same verse. My eye will weep sorely, dama tidma, that's 2, and flow with tears, because the Lord's flock has been taken captive. So the Gemara asks, why these 3 tears in this one verse in Jeremiah? And the Gemara answers that one of the tears is for the destruction of the first temple. One of the tears is for the destruction of the second temple. And the third tear is because of the exile of the people from the land. And you can say to yourself, if these people who I just described a minute ago said there's nothing special about Jews living in Israel if there's no temple, then why was there a need for a third tier? We're already crying because of the destruction of the first and second temple. So what that the Jews were exiled? It doesn't matter. If Jews live here, it's just like living in exile. Who cares? And the answer is that that's exactly what the Gemara is telling us. It is telling us that we need to institute another tier for the fact that the Jews were exiled. In other words, it was not absolute exile, even though the temple was destroyed, since there were still Jews living in Eretz Yisrael. And that's talking about when we were in exile. So we went from exile. I like explaining it. You look at the exile or redemption as a chart. You know, from left to right, you go from exile to redemption. It's not one or the other. There are stages in between also. Absolute exile is when the Jewish people are living outside the land of Israel, and when we don't have a temple, and we don't have prophets, and we don't live the way we're supposed to live. Absolute redemption will happen when the Jewish people come back to live in Israel, and when the Messiah comes and when the temple is rebuilt. That's the absolute redemption. But in the middle, we have a situation, and that's what we're living through right now, where the Jewish people are returning. Almost half the Jewish people already returned to Eretz Yisrael. So we have, on the one hand, we don't have a temple. So we're still definitely in a state of exile, but at least we're in the place of redemption. At least the Jewish people are returning to the land of Israel. So we are on our way. We're at least halfway through. We're at least halfway down that chart from exile to redemption. And Jews have to understand that and have to be part of this process and add more and more Jews to the land of Israel, so that we can get closer and closer to the ultimate redemption, when the temple will be rebuilt and the Messiah will come and save us from all of our troubles. Josh, are you with us? Ooh, I think he dropped off. No, you're with us. Oh, okay. Here. Sorry.
Beautiful Torah for a very, very serious day in the Jewish calendar. Something that in fact, I used to work for many years in the Knesset under Rabbeinu Alon, and he put in a number of times. He tried to pass a law here that the day that was designated to remember the assassination of the Prime Minister Yitzhak Rabin should be on Tzom Gedalya, because the idea of a Jewish person assassinating another Jewish person was something that we should all be mourning about, and it's something that we should remember, that it's not the first time it happened. It happened in our history before, and it's something that we have to learn a lesson from in order not to repeat it in the future.
Correct. Okay, so we had another successful show, and thank you all for joining us, and we will see you next week is Yom Kippur, so we're not on next week, correct?
Yes, following week.
Okay, the following week. We'll see you Sukkot.
Israel News Talk Radio's chat room. Just click the orange button at the top of the IsraelNewsTalkRadio.home page, log in as yourself or an anonymous guest, and join in on the fun. You'll meet other listeners from all over the world who listen to Israel News Talk Radio, and you can make new friends. Israel News Talk Radio's chat room. It's the closest you can get to being in the studio with us.
We love listening to Israel News Talk Radio.
Where can you get the inside news on Israel? At Israel News Talk Radio, we're dedicated to sharing Israel's inside story with the world by providing our listeners with news on Israeli politics, current affairs, and Israeli Jewish culture. The Israel News Talk Radio homepage also provides you, the listener, with useful information at your fingertips, with scrolling news headlines, weather, currency exchange, Shabbat candlelighting times, and so much more. Our radio programming is always accessible and on demand. We operate absolutely free of charge for everyone, everywhere. If you love what we do, partner with us now by becoming an Israel News Talk Radio supporter. With your support, you'll be inscribed on our Israel News Talk Radio Wall of Fame. There's nothing like us in the world. Be part of something great. Israel News Talk Radio. Straight talk from Israel.
If you love Israel News Talk Radio, then you'll love our Facebook page. We keep you up to date on what's happening in Israel, plus little surprise treasures that we don't share on the radio. Go now to follow us on Facebook. Just look for the Israel News Talk Radio Facebook page, and don't forget to subscribe and follow us by clicking on the like button. We post great stuff there that you'll want to share. Israel News Talk Radio on Facebook and Israel News Radio on Twitter.
News, opinion, and more. You're listening to Israel News Talk Radio.